Hello, survivors. Welcome to the State of Decay 2 stream. I'm your host, Geoffrey Card, and I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Mr. Bloodferal right here. Now, I've invited Mr. Bloodferal along because, like many people in our audience, he is dealing with some sight limitations. He actually has a lot of trouble seeing because of the giant bony plate that's grown over his eyes. Now, so he relies on sound in order to track down his prey and devour human flesh. And so, you know, he felt like an appropriate sort of guest to bring along with us for the subject of today's stream, which is the audio in State of Decay 2. So I've got a couple of very special guests with me today. Let's start with Jordan, who is the audio lead on State of Decay 2. Welcome to the stream, Jordan.
Hi, everybody.
So Jordan is going to perhaps join us playing a little bit later. He's also here to answer your questions about the audio in State of Decay 2, so definitely write in those good questions in the chat. The mods will forward them to us, and hopefully get a bunch of them answered for you by the end of the stream. Jordan's not the only audio person here today, though. We've also got Alex, a sound designer, and Foley artist, whose work is going to be on display a little bit later in the stream. How you doing, Alex?
I'm fantastic. Wonderful to be here. And I don't know, I play fast and loose with the Foley artist. I try, but there are some true Foley artist pros out there that really do a much better job than me.
Well, we're gonna see a sample of your work a little bit later and talk about the process of doing Foley. But I would be remiss if I did not introduce our third guest, who is Brant Fitzgerald, everyone's favorite. And you know that I've got this habit on the stream of putting joke job titles next to Brant's name on his name tag. But this time, this is not a joke. So Kevin Punn, our erstwhile art director, brilliant illustrator who came up with a lot of the art that we've been showing off on this stream, he has moved on to some other duties elsewhere in the company that we maybe can't talk in detail about, but he's going on to do something else, and Brant has stepped into his shoes. So Brant is now the art director of State of Decay 2. Welcome, Brant, and we're so thrilled to have you in this job. I mean, like, honestly, I can't think of a better guy to do this kind of work, so thank you.
Thank you. My work was made easy. I'm stepping into a situation that's very well established in a team that runs really well. So basically, it's, you know, another job that I don't really have to work.
Well, we've got the chat going wild, congratulating you on your new position, Brant. So, and I'm really happy to have you there too. You and I have been working together for like 7 years now, and I can't think of a partner that I'd rather spend the next little while with making State of Decay 2. So, those
Awesome.
are our guests. But we've also got a game to play. So, as we're still accumulating some new questions from the chat, let's get started with the game. So, Alex and I are already in the game here, and we're running around in our beautiful cowboy hats. And Brant. Oh, look, Brant's here too. Hello, Brant. So yeah, so we're all gathered here together. We got to decide what we're going to do. Oh, actually, you know what? My character's kind of tired. She's been sitting here waiting through all of us getting ready to play. So why don't we switch to Eric? Eric looks like he's ready for all weather. So we'll jump into this guy's shoes. Oh, whoa. I'm inside. Where is it? Where am I? Oh, here we are. I spawned in a monster closet. Boom, you guys didn't expect me to pop out of a monster closet, did you? Okay, so while we were in the pre-stream, by the way, so I think the plan right now is we should just run out and get into some trouble. Maybe, just scavenge some buildings, fight a few zombies, keep the gameplay pretty light because we're here really to talk to these audio designers. So one of the first questions that we got in the chat as we started sort of introducing the idea that we were going to be talking to the audio team was, how do you make zombie sounds? Because is it mostly vocal performance? Is there more to it than that? Alex or Jordan, do you want to give us some insight into how we get that like weird, not quite human noise coming out of their faces?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. For our game, it is performances. So some of the, I'm not sure if some of the actors who actually are our characters in the game took a stab at it, but we definitely had people that just are professional creature voice actors. Like that's just part of their resume. I'm sure they do other voice acting, other traditional voiceover, but they also can specialize in creatures. And so those people are recorded doing various growls and groans and all the stuff you hear that the zombies do. And we show up with a big list of all the sounds we want from them, and kind of put them to the test, and so to speak, because it's very challenging, as you might imagine, to make a groan sound different from another groan when it's an attack or a hit, or the zombies like climbing over something, or they have tons and tons of behaviors, and each of those things is a unique sound effect, is a unique recording to represent each of those things, which is meant to give the zombies like a huge vocabulary, so to speak. But and the more variety you have, the better your zombies are, right? And I think we have maybe 6 actors did it, 3 male, 3 female, and so that's like, and then we take those raw recordings back, and our director Kevin, he went through and did all did some processing, some audio techniques on those to make them sound even more monstrous than they would just raw, right? Pitching, EQ, distortion, like common audio techniques, right?
Actually, I don't know what those techniques are. You say EQ? That's the one that I don't really have any idea what it means.
EQ meaning equalization. It's just you can boost and lower frequencies.
Oh, gotcha. So there's something going on at a lower frequency you want to pull out, then you can mess with the levels in different frequencies and make that happen.
Exactly. Yeah, you can either boost or cut across the frequency spectrum.
So I just realized, by the way, my car is almost completely out of gas, so I'm looking for a place where we can scavenge some gas, and I haven't found it yet. Oh yeah, this one's already been searched too.
There's a gas tank right here.
What?
There's a gas thing right where I'm standing.
Oh my gosh, I'm blind. Okay, well, thank you. So do you actually see the people doing the performances in the booth when they're making these noises? Do they like act like a zombie? Do they try to get into character?
Yeah, it helps them a lot actually to emote as much as they can, right? And be as expressive as they need to be to get into character, because they really are getting into character when they do it. And I think the people that can kind of let themselves go the most end up having the best performances. You just sort of, you don't hold back. You're not embarrassed. You just go crazy.
Yeah, it's nice to sort of
I have some old videos from the original State of Decay where we all were in a room trying to make zombie sounds for Kevin to put into the game. I think we were all so horrible that Kevin ended up just doing all the male voices himself.
I know he did all of the original ones, but I didn't realize the genesis of that. Like, why he ended up doing all that.
So the blood plague zombies specifically sound different from the other zombies in a really consistent way. Could you tell us a little bit about sort of like what makes them different and how those sounds are created?
Sure. Yeah, Alex, you want to take that one on?
Yeah. We, as the blood plague zombies came online, we kind of needed a way to transform the same vocal performance of the other zombies, but just kind of reprocess them in a different way. And so we ended up going with sort of like an offline, or sorry, like a runtime process in the game audio engine that we have, where we can apply a certain kinds of effects on top of the regular zombies. So all those plague zombies are the same audio files and audio source as the other zombies, but they have like a plague like vocal effect chain on them with like some other sorts of like distortion and like little bits of like tremolo vibraty kind of stuff, but like vocal quality to their to the way that they roar and stuff. And so I think we really wanted them to still be the exact same zombie, but with an additional vocal quality to them to make them sound a little different. And we get the the added benefit of not doubling the amount of audio that's there, because you do have a limitation of how much you can add, and we couldn't actually make double the amount of audio files for double the amount of zombies. And so this was a way for us to be able to accomplish the goals with still maintaining our memory budget, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, so it means that there's no special like blood plague noises in like in the sort of audio files in the game. Like it's just the same zombie sounds. They're just being sort of run through a filter, basically. They're a complicated filter.
Yeah, though they're
So is that the same for the blood feral and all that?
No, actually, yeah. So when Heartland came around, we were able to load more zombies because they were unique to that map, right? So for those creatures, those were new designs, and so for that stuff, I took what Kevin had done and brought that stuff into Pro Tools, into the audio editor, and then kind of sweetened it up and did some other effects and stuff, and then basically made sort of a blood plague version of those sounds. So those are like unique assets, custom assets, and not a process. So yeah, the feral the Juggernaut, the Screamer. Alex did the Screamer, and Alex, you like sweetened up all the attacks and stuff. Those were all like brand new sounds.
Yeah, I think like what we were able to do because you can't have both the feral and the blood feral at the same time, then we were able to just swap the audio in and out for each other so we can have a different sound for that, as opposed to the blood plague zombies, which do exist alongside the other one. So that's the difference there.
Yeah, you'll notice that's actually one of the main reasons, players, like when you change your combat difficulty, we don't have to build a new map for you from scratch the way we used to have to, but we still have to sort of start the game over again a little bit. And the reason for that is in large part because we need to swap out the audio and basically swap out the blood plague monsters from the regular ones, because they can't all be loaded at the same time. They've all got and their audio budget is a part of that.
Yeah. Speaking of like resources, actually, for Heartland, because it was like everything was a plague zombie, we were concerned about running that DSP process, that digital signal processing on all the zombie vocals all at the same time, because we were worried about like hitting a CPU limit with that. And so for Heartland specifically, the zombie vocals became new assets as well. And so I did a process on all the vocals to try and, as best I could, match the sound of the effect of the original sound of them, in the vanilla game. Wow. And so those zombies specifically in Heartland, like if you notice, sound just a little different than plague zombies that you're used to in the normal game.
So I stopped us by this outpost because I needed to repair the car. But if any of you need to swap out characters or anything, this is the time. What were you starting to say, Brant?
We've got a question. We got a question from Little Ninja. Were any animal sounds used as zombie sounds?
I don't think so.
What about the Screamer?
Yeah, I think they're kind of like, I think the process that Kevin wanted to go originally, and kind of going, because he was the vocal performer for all of the Freak vocals, and so he wanted them to be very human, right? So they were coming from humans. He wanted to remain that and keep kind of the animals a little bit low in there. I do know that he did add some like tiger vocals or leopard vocals or something, or panther to
feral. Yeah. And then the Screamer had like a pig squeal kind of.
Yeah, I think it's like a mixture of just like horses and some pigs and stuff to kind of like make it that kind of like extra bit. You want it to stay human, but if you need something extra on there, you just have to add something otherworldly to kind of give it that characteristic, and then mix it in a way so that it's not obvious, right? You're not thinking that's horse screaming, but it's some sort of I mean, just like the Blood Plague Screamer, like there's some elk and some pig and stuff in there as well. So it's like,
wow,
animal stuff, but you don't quite know what it is.
Oh, hey, Alex, want to run out to the car? We can move on.
Fine. God, I just wanted to chill on this outpost.
It is a great outpost. It does look like a very comfy house. This car is in much, much better shape now. By the way, so one thing that I feel like I kind of made a mistake here, since we're doing an audio-focused stream. I should not have, for instance, shot that one Screamer before he got to make his scream. And we were in the middle of talking when we passed by, like the reason we got into that fight with that feral was because I heard its telltale noise. And so I stopped the car. I was like, where's the feral? And it accommodated me by jumping out there.
That's something, we hear a lot, or on Reddit, I'll read through the Reddit forum, and every now and then, and it's happened more than once, people comment on that feral scream. as being like, one of the more like scarier sounds in the game, or just something kind of iconic to them. So that's pretty cool that people like are, that in touch with, not just the audio, but like a particular sound.
Yeah, because that sound, like by itself, you might just think, oh, it's just some zombie making a noise. But after you realize what the sound means, your brain starts sort of pulling it out from the background, and so it doesn't matter what other zombies are doing. If you hear that feral make a noise, like you know that you're in trouble, even though it's not like it's louder than the other sounds, or it's just distinctive enough that you can identify it, right?
Yeah, and one of the things we do is we can choose how far you can hear a certain sound from, and what we do with the sound based on that distance. So, like the regular zombies, for instance, is they're kind of just like, idling around. They kind of have this low kind of like shambling sound. We don't really hear that from super far away, because you don't really need to hear them from far away. But the feral, when they see you, you want to know that they see you from far away and you have a chance to escape. So we kind of push that attenuation out a bit.
Yeah, and I think at like, in our terms, like in an extra long distance, we even send his vocal a little extra to the reverb, so you get a more sense of like a distant sound from him. And then I think, if you're listening in surround speakers, you would hear that sound like all around you, like it would turn up in your surround setup.
So I'm kind of not playing this very intelligently, because I want to get as many zombies in here as I can, and I also wanted to experiment with some of the sounds that players don't necessarily always hear all the time, like the whistling box mine. Oh gosh, which it brings all the boys to the yard.
I was playing and talking, and I was getting my ass kicked by that feral.
The feral.
There's a feral? Oh no. I'm glad that you guys are dealing with him, not me.
I wouldn't say I'm actually dealing with him.
And I don't have my sound turned on, so I'm not putting feedback into this broadcast, and so it's doubly terrifying for me.
All right, so let's see here. There's so many questions people have about just sort of the very specific sounds they remember, like the feral when he's sort of pawing his way after you, and you hear that sort of like panting as he's getting closer and closer and closer. So there was somebody in the chat who was very curious about like those. MRD Gaming wants to know those breathing and panting sounds. Is that just one of you like panting into a microphone, or what's going on?
Yeah, I think that's part of Kevin's original performance, and I think he recorded the whole sort of suite of sounds for all of his behaviors: an attack, a death, the big scream you hear in the background, and then and sprinting. And so that's the base of that would be Kevin doing like vocal exertions into a microphone, and then I think layered up probably with a little bit of that, with that panther or tiger or whatever, like some big cats I think got mixed in a little bit with that.
Yeah,
to be fair, Kevin walks around on all fours anyways, so I don't think it was a big stretch.
We just put the microphone up to him as he was going about his day-to-day life. And yeah, and like timing those vocals out too, I think is important to get that perfect cadence that you expect from that, like the breathe in, breathe out, to get really rhythmic, so that you kind of, as it gets closer, it gets louder, and that same sort of rhythm I think is important as well to get that timing right.
Well, yeah, you have to sort of like match it to his gait, right? Like like all of the footfalls and stuff like that. Is that just sort of timed with the animation? Are you triggering those as part of the animation?
Yeah, so like the animation you have the whole feral sort of like suite of moves it can do, and then you can just go through and then time each footstep or each breath to kind of like cycle perfectly, and then all the different transitions and stuff are all timed like in conjunction with the animation itself, so we can get like that precise timing.
Hey, there's this really interesting question from Kid Green 78. Actually, who says basically, actually, Brant, can you see that question? Do you want to read it? Because I'm driving the car.
I'll read it.
Go for it.
It's been a while since I played SOD2, but I, as an ex-music and audio engineer student and current acoustic student, was very impressed with the work put into the audio. Do you use Pro Tools, and how did you get the right reverb echo effects when firing a gun in certain locations? I'm assuming indoor, outdoor, stuff like that.
Sure, yeah. I'll try to split this with you, Alex. Yeah, Pro Tools is our main DAW, digital audio workstation, which is the software that we use to edit and design sound in. Although we've been experimenting a little bit with another program called Reaper as well. But yeah, Pro Tools is kind of like it's our standard. You know, you can argue it's an industry standard, but that's changing probably these days. But yeah, so as far as the guns go, when we were thinking about how we would design that stuff, we knew we wanted to represent the tail of the weapon. Like that's kind of one of the most important sort of features of a gun sound is the sound of that gun like trailing off. And so we wanted to represent what it sounded like when you're inside a building, when you're near a building, and when you're like kind of in an open field. And so that open field gives you that huge like that's the longest sort of trailing off bit. And then if you're near a building, you get what we call like a slapback delay, which is kind of like a ping pong sound, where you get one sort of delay bounce off the side of a wall, and then when you're inside, you get that kind of like tanky, you know, in your face kind of percussive, really short but deep sounding tail. Is there anything you want to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, and you know, like how we decide where to switch those tails is really completely dependent on like the environment you're in. You know, like each building specifically will switch when you go inside, but around each building you have oh god, there's a screamer. You have you'll get that slapback delay around each one of the buildings and in like a downtown area, and it's all defined based on like the map itself. So you go around the map and you draw these areas of where you want it to sound. We also have in-game reverb as well that is that we send all of the gun sounds to as well. So you'll get that pre-baked tail, but then all that still goes into the reverb system for each building you're in, so you get like the sense of that actual space as well. So, yeah, and as far as DAW, I'm like totally on board with Reaper, man. That's like the best thing in the world. So I'm out Pro Tools forever. Reaper's the best. Get Reaper.
So we've actually had, I think we've had a couple of. Oh, go ahead, Brant.
I was just going to say, just to follow up on that, there's some questions about, did we actually use real guns for the recordings?
Yeah, we did. We had a local sound designer at the time. His name's Chris Larson. He had organized his own gun shoot. And he picked the place to do it out in Eastern Washington. I think a friend of his had some land out there, and they gathered up the guns they wanted to record and set up the mics one day and found the best position to capture the audio and kind of let it rip. And so, vast majority, I would say, of the guns were his guns, and a lot of it was fairly one-to-one with what we were making. I mean, you know, like AKs and Glocks and Walthers, and I mean, the list goes on and on. I think our game has got tons and tons of weapons, but over time we're adding more and more guns, and so the library that he provided us started to kind of wear a little thin because we've been using those so much. And so we started then to kind of source our own recordings and start, doing our best to represent the new guns, sometimes with brand new content, sometimes with a mix of things he did. And so, I would say, but the vast majority of the guns did come from, custom weapons recording session. And then since then, we've kind of gone into like some commercial libraries and stuff to support.
Just a bit of trivia. Christopher is also a playable character in our game.
That's right.
He sat down for a scan.
I just realized that I just brought us back to the exact same place we've been before because I got distracted. But at least I get to pick up some plague hearts along the way. Actually, I don't know if we were there this session. We might have been here a different session. I don't know. I've completely lost track of everything. Let's see here. One question that I've had about the sounds, like what goes into making the suppressed version of a gunshot sound, or like the version that's got a break on it, where we're trying to, at least in the world of the game, say that the sound should be louder, should attract more zombies. Like what kind of, are you just doing some kind of processing on the sound, or is it a completely independent sound? How do you approach that?
It's a little bit of both. Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, all the suppressed weapons, as soon as you attach that mod, it will switch to a completely different set of gun sounds. So, and we'll do remixing. The guns are all broken into different segments, like a mech layer, a body layer, an impulse layer, and we swap out that body layer to be a suppressed version. So we specifically design it with recordings of suppressed weapons, and then beef it up a bit to give it a more like game-like characteristic to make it sound really cool still. And then we just swap that out. So it's all the same gun assets, but with a new suppressor on top of it. So you're still, if you have the AK, you still get the base set of AK sounds, and with the AK suppressor on top of it, that gets switched out. So it's that sort of like modular approach. If you have all the different segments of the guns all broken out, you can then swap different parts based on different situations. And then, I don't know, Jordan, you want to talk about the runtime break processing that we did too?
I don't know if we did anything for breaks in particular. We did something for that compensating suppressor, right?
Oh, right, yeah, the new one that arrived with, was it the open range pack, or no? It was one of the other packs, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, it was like, it was like a special. I forgot which pack it was with.
Yeah, I think it was an addition to the World War II pack when we reintroduced it.
Oh, maybe so.
It's basically like it kind of is like a suppressor, but it's suppressed a little bit less, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it also is like a break in one.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's go bag.
Oh right, that's the go bag. Either way, yeah. So it was a special gun attachment that does some of the work of a suppressor, some of the work of a break. So it seemed like it needed to sound a little different from everything else, right?
Yeah. So that's it's fairly subtle. How that sounds compared to regular suppressed weapons, but we did want it to be different because it is functionally different, and so we were able to do a different mix of the same suppressed sounds that would be on that weapon, just for the compensating suppressor, and so I think it's just it's got a little more low end kick on it, yeah, a little beefier sounding.
I love hearing just all of these sort of just terms that you use, because like, there's this entire jargon, this entire like other language that you have to be able to speak in order to talk intelligently about the details of how a sound works that most people just don't have to think about, because most of us just absorb this stuff. Like, we have a natural sense of like, oh yeah, that gun did sound like it was fired indoors, and that one sounded like it was fired outdoors, and we can pick up on it, and it matters to the sense of realism and authenticity in the world, but we don't actually know in our heads consciously what's different about the sound that's making it sound indoors or outdoors. But you guys have this entire language for describing exactly what you're doing, which is just fascinating for me to listen to the two of you talk to each other about it.
Yeah, it's like we can't even get out of that mode of talking either. Like, it's something like we'll be describing something like a feature request or something we're doing, and people just be like, what does that mean? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. You don't. Yeah, I've been talking to Jordan for like 3 years straight about suppressed gun tails and whatever, you know.
So, Crazy Train wants... go ahead.
We got a question from It's Your Boy Dano, who says, what did you use for the Echo Labs weapon sounds, since they were significantly different?
I kind of remember. They're not necessarily new content, right, Alex? Like, those were kind of like really kind of extreme mix tweaks on those guns. So the approach we wanted to go for those was to make them really quiet, and make them more mechanical sounding than percussive, to kind of sell their sort of like futuristicness.
So you feel like you're hearing the actual like machinery of the gun make noise more than you're hearing the like concussive blast of the explosion inside the gun?
Exactly, yeah. And so to do that, we would use those mech layers that Alex was talking about, and play those up more against the other layers, like the body and the impulse. And so we still wanted to, give it a nice crack, right? A nice sort of satisfying punch, but not so much emphasis of like the percussiveness or the tail, and so you just get more of like a tighter mechanical clack kind of sound, for lack of a better word.
And that kind of really does like speak to the way that we add the guns into the game. That gives us so much flexibility too, because we can recombine different sets of guns and different to make a brand new gun with assets that are already in the game and already being used. And like you were saying, Jordan, we want to play up certain aspects of the echo weapon, and so we can then remix that stuff. We can pitch it up or do some filtering to like really stretch the content to make completely cool new stuff without having to completely redesign things from the ground up.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that that's just kind of the nature of an open world game that, you know, has as much content as our game and the size of our team, right? I think it, you know, it's really just for most of State of Decay 2, it's just the three of us, myself, Alex, and Kevin, and so we're really sort of careful with, you know, how we spend our time and how we make our content, and to make it modular and to make it expandable in that way.
Looks like we managed to actually take care of this infestation just by attracting all the zombies over to us. We didn't actually need to go into the house to fight the monsters, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that your parking job right in front of that blood jug was a great one, Geoffrey. Thank you.
I mean, we're trying to bring the action to the audience. It's great. Well, let's head back to the car, I guess. So I started to pass on a question.
Oh, go ahead,
from,
Geoffrey.
I started to pass on a question from Crazy Train earlier. Since we're getting in the car, he wanted to know if the audio for the game was for the vehicles in the game was recorded from actual vehicles, and I kind of want to go a little further with that too. Like, you know, I know that the process of putting together the sounds that respond dynamically to, you know, the gears in the car changing, how I'm accelerating, decelerating, skidding. It feels like one of the most complicated audio problems to solve in the game is to make a car feel realistic. So I'd love for you guys to talk about sort of what all goes into that process.
Yes, yeah, cars, yeah, they're very, very difficult from an audio standpoint. Like, you know, I think someone maybe early on said something like, "What's the hardest thing to design for this game?" And you know, before I started working on this game, I would have probably said like, "Oh, it's definitely like the creatures or something," right? But actually, that kind of stuff is the easier stuff, is to make the sounds for the fantastical. Nobody's ever seen this thing before, because nobody has an expectation of a blood plague feral, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. But a vehicle, everybody knows what a vehicle should sound like. And so to accurately simulate or recreate a sound of a car in a game is a huge technical challenge and a huge sort of creative challenge to give people what they expect. So really the hard stuff is realism is actually the most difficult.
Well, it's got to be tough too, because I mean, some of what the audience expects is realism for things like vehicles, which is an everyday thing. But some of it is like, I mean, the actual sound of a gun being fired through a suppressor is very different from what audiences are used to hearing Hollywood suppressors do. And you have to somehow like find a way to make a semi-realistic sound that nevertheless doesn't completely violate what players expect. Because when they, you know, screw something on the end of their gun, they expect it to be whisper silent. Like, how do you sort of navigate that weird space where it's like you don't want to be crazy fantastical, but also you know what the audience is looking for?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, I want to get back to the vehicle stuff too.
Oh, sure.
But
Sorry,
gun...
I didn't mean to interrupt. You set me off on another topic. But
no, I'll answer that too. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think for the guns in that instance, we were still focused on what's real, and I think we really wanted to say, like, you know, a gun doesn't sound like a Hollywood, you know, pew pew silencer sound, right? That's like, no gun really sounds like that. So we wanted that mechanical, clacky kind of sound in our game, and hopefully, you know, hopefully we change people's minds about what to expect with that, right? And like,
fight the good fight.
Guns can you know, that's a little presumptuous, but you know, it can start to change the narrative of what people think a suppressed weapon should sound like, right?
I'm so thankful that you guys decided to go that way too. because I hate nothing more than that pew pew that you get when you see Steven Seagal cross out a bad guy with a suppressor. It just
Yeah, whenever
And-
I'm
skin crawl.
We have so many guns, like the suppressed part of the weapon needed to sound unique still to that weapon, and having that Hollywood sound on every gun wouldn't have worked for us. It would have made them all sound just like that. And so then they would have lost their character.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been ruined for a lot of like Hollywood movies. It's like anytime somebody just punches someone once in the face and they're knocked out for just the duration of whatever time is needed, and anytime someone just screws a suppressor onto a gun and now they make almost no sound. Like I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm watching a fantasy movie now. I'm not actually watching a real story. I wish that I could still believe in that stuff, but unfortunately, all the research that we do to sort of find out how this stuff works to make it work in a game means that it sort of ruins you forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, it's definitely a hard balance to do, because you try to straddle that realism versus what actually is feeling good, and so you kind of start one end of the spectrum, and then you kind of like find yourself like creeping one way or the other to kind of find what both feels good as a player and what also is going to sound aesthetically like we want it to sound with the kind of the direction we've set up.
So I sidetracked Jordan, and he was on his way to saying something more about the vehicles. I should let him get that out before we move on.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the question was like, are those vehicle recordings?
Yeah, did you get them from real vehicles, or what did you do? Yeah.
Yeah. We pulled the lab and asked to borrow people's cars, and took them to a quiet park early in the morning, and set up the microphones, and we recorded all the doors and switches. Got all the like Foley of the car, for to use the term loosely.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wired up mics to the engines and the exhaust, and drove them up a hill so we can get that sort of on-load, stress sound of the engine, which we use a middleware plugin called Rev, which is a engine simulator. And so it can take the recording of an engine and kind of resynthesize it into a file that it can use to be able to manipulate the audio.
So as the player's like pushing down the accelerator, braking, going up hills, going down hills, it knows what to do with the audio in order to shift with all those situations?
Exactly, yeah. It can use the RPMs that the game feeds to accelerate or decelerate, and then also shift gears, and even though we would record automatic cars, the game can kind of simulate a gear shift when they occur. So we did custom recordings of cars, and in our game, our cars are junky, right? They're like 90s like sedans and stuff like that, right? So we were able to just borrow people's cars from the lab, versus like Forza, they have to find supercars and mic up super rare expensive cars. So we were.
So who at the lab had this one? That's what I want to know.
Actually, that car. We may have had to buy that engine actually.
Oh yeah.
Because we didn't have access to that particular type of car. So there are a couple instances where we just didn't have the access to get our hands on something that would fit the engine of that car. So in that case, we would purchase it from someone who did have that recording.
Well, let's head back to the base, because so Alex actually prepared a video of what it sort of what some of the raw audio is like when it's first recorded, and I kind of want to share that with the audience, but I want to do it while we're not in the middle of danger, when we've got a bunch of NPCs that can protect us. I
was just setting off one of my favorite explosives because the great sound that the dynamite makes off in the distance.
Oh yeah.
But before before we do this, this is a great sort of segue question. What kind of field recorders do you use? Kid Green 78 says, I'm doing some bioacoustic research and need some suggestions. So maybe you can talk about that while you're.
Why don't I put this thing up, and maybe Alex can talk about exactly what he's doing here.
Yeah. I would say that we use like any and all types of recorders, from small handheld with a couple of onboard microphones to expensive field recording gear with expensive microphones. Really, our main goal is to capture the sound whenever we have the opportunity. So sometimes that's setting up an array of microphones and recording some stuff you have on hand or some ideas that you have for a certain feature. Sometimes it's just you're on vacation and there's a cool thing happening and you pull out your pocket recorder. It's really about like having something to record all the time. I don't think I could really speak necessarily to what would be the best to record for the bioacoustics research, but we have a lot of I do a lot of nature recording here or there and stuff that has a really low noise level, so you can get like the pristine quality while turning things up to an appropriate listening level. That is probably going to be your best bet for nature stuff. We also use stuff for recording birds, a parabolic microphone, which is a parabolic dish that has a microphone actually facing inside the dish. And what it does is it focuses all the sound in through the dish and points it right at the microphone because it's a perfect parabola shape. And so it focuses all the sound right at that microphone. And so you can get really detailed, close recordings of birds that are in a tree, like, halfway across this field. So those kinds of things, we just have lots of different techniques of what kinds of microphones you want to use for which situation. But really, the best microphone that you have is the one that you have on hand for anything.
Just being ready is more important than necessarily, have you found like is some of the best stuff that you recorded been stuff that you didn't even realize you were going to be recording that day, and then it just came up and you managed to grab it?
Oh yeah, I have this old crappy recorder that I used for so long. Didn't really sound super great, and I got this really awesome cricket chirping sound that was super isolated on a super quiet night in Eastern Washington, and that is like one of my favorite cricket recordings ever. And it's just what I happened to have in my hand on that particular night, and I just went and got it. And it's actually I used that cricket in Heartland in the map somewhere. It's out there next you can. And I just really love that recording. I'll always think of that recording, and the handheld recorder I had was like $100 or something.
So, okay, so when you're recording this ambient audio, a lot of this is actually going to be used in the game in very similar situations, right? Like when you're near some trees that have wind blowing through them, this is when you'll use the tree blowing, audio. When you're under the giant, when you're under the giant windmills at Meager Valley, that's when you're going to use the giant windmill thing. But some of the stuff you're doing here, like breaking sheetrock, like what kinds of uses would you put a sound like that into? Like the one where you're dropping a bunch of potatoes. Like, I assume unless we have like a potato hucking feature in the game, chances are that potato is not going to be a potato when the player sees it. Is that right?
Right, which I hope we for sure have the potato hucking feature. That I'm going to put that on an idea board somewhere. It needs to happen. And we already have the source for it. So basically 90 to 99% of the work is already done. But going back to some of that more obscure stuff, it's, you kind of always have to be recording with certain things in mind, but you always have to think, this is going to be used for something that I don't know what it's going to be used for. I don't really actually knew it when I was recording that drywall breaking part. I didn't know what it was going to be used for, and there's I think I also crumbled it up and then dropped it on some wood, which I then ended up using for like, some debris falling, from maybe an explosion or something. Or, when you break that stuff apart, you can kind of layer up those raw recordings and process them and make them like super huge and thick. So this kind of little break sound can become a really huge rock break, So all these things are just different layers you can process and add together to create something that's unique. And, there could be 1,000 uses that I don't even know of yet. And I might just need something that is like impactful and crunchy is kind of like what I would look for. And so then I like look through my sound library of, okay, what's impactful and crunchy? And then I might find that and it might be the perfect thing.
By the way, Kid, what was his name? Kid Green 78 was actually very grateful for the feedback that you gave about the audio equipment to use and stuff like that. And he had an earlier comment about how he really liked the some of the sounds that you get in the game that you don't really think about that much, like the sound of going through your inventory, like just clicking from thing to thing. A lot of these noises, these are not things that really are associated. I mean, in real life, obviously, we don't have HUDs and menus that pop up in front of us. How do you decide like what to do with the sound of something that doesn't exist at all in the real world, that is wholly abstract?
Yeah, I'll take that one on. Yeah, so I was responsible for making all the UI sounds. Yeah, that's a pretty challenging task for any sound designer for that reason, because it's got to be made out of thin air. You know, but it has to be more than that too. It has to represent kind of the art. It's got to reinforce what the sort of theme of the art is, and then it's also has to be informative to the player as far as like a sense of feedback. You know, hitting enter to go into a menu. You know, hitting B to back out. You know, escaping. You know, all those things should have like a feeling of that reinforces what it's doing. And so you'll notice things like pitching up or pitching down is a really common technique to sort of sell the motion, so to speak, of moving through a menu. And I wanted our menus to, you know, have a lot of variety. So you'll notice the sound just for clicking around the items in your inventory, just a small little ticks of going between stuff. It's different for when you're on an item versus on an empty slot.
Oh, interesting. And I'd love to illustrate this for the audience, but unfortunately, I think I've got the sound effects turned down low enough so that we can always hear our discussion. That I think something as subtle as the inventory sounds is probably not coming through. But go check it out in your own game and listen to what he's saying and check it out in your own game.
Yeah, and so, or like backing out of that menu is going to sound totally different from backing out of like the base menu, for instance. So I was really interested in just getting like tons and tons of coverage across everything we did, because I knew our game was menu heavy, and so I wanted that experience to not feel stale by reusing sounds for everything. You know, that is not the same left and right sound or the same back out sound, and you'll notice that things are different across everything.
Yeah, it is interesting listening to like when the spotlight moves around. It's like whoa, 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 whoa. Sound is really different from what you get like, you know, clicking around between these different icons here, and you get sort of this like, yeah, sort of I don't want to try to like onomatopoeia these things.
I mean,
there's no description.
Well, speaking of, you know, how audio people talk to each other, it's, you know, 90% onomatopoeia and maybe 10% like technical jargon.
Like,
yeah, Geoffrey, try going to dinner with these three, and it's, if you're not an audio person, you don't understand any of the conversations they're having.
MSSC Track 92 wants to know, how did you make the muffled sound on a character's voice when they're wearing the welding mask? I think that one actually was a lot of dedicated effort, right?
I love this one. I think it's so fun. Jordan, you talk about it. It's so cool.
Sure, yeah. You know, we had wanted to support masks for a little while, and it took a bit of engineering to help us figure out how we're gonna change the voice, because if you have a hood over your head, naturally you'd expect your voice to be muffled. I think we all know that now from wearing masks.
Yeah, totally.
In our day-to-day lives, right? And so we sort of conformed our vocals. So, you know, all the characters have, you know, they can speak their lines, and then they also, you know, can jump and grunt and, you know, react in pain and all that stuff. And so we were able to use Y switches and effects to process those things in real time when you have a hat on that's marked as a mask, and the effect is kind of actually you kind of inspired this because of all your experiments with convolution reverb. To back up, convolution reverb is just a type of reverb that is recorded by sampling like the impulse of a space. So all our reverbs in the game are convolutions, and those are captured by like recording the sound of like a hand clap or a sharp, transient sound, like an impact, and then you record what that sounds like bouncing in the space that you're in, and then the software can then apply that sound to other sounds, and then you get the effect of the reverb on that sound. And so you can do that in sort of more like smaller spaces, like a mask. So I took actually for the welder's mask, I had like a leather jacket, and I just covered my microphones with a leather jacket, recorded the sound of that, that slap or that crack, right? And then got the impulse and then applied that to the effect. And there you have all the sounds, affected by that impulse going, when you have the mask on. I hope that's clear. It's like as quick as I can explain that.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, for the sake of the stream, I did sort of, I tamped down all of the VO because whenever the characters talk to each other, that can interfere with our conversation. And so it's impossible really to show players right now what it sounds like for a character to talk while they get the mask on. But in your games at home, check it out. Like put on the welding mask, put on the swine and bovine mask, or anything that sort of covers and muffles the face, and hear how the character talks differently. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool that people notice that. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I really like that process and using the convolution in that way. It's just really cool. You can do all sorts of things like use the convolution through a speaker and get the sound of that speaker to then apply, and the fact that it's the same technology that uses the reverb when you're inside of the warehouse to get that echo as to the mask. I think that's so cool, and I'm happy that we got to do that.
So Overlord Rhapsody wants to know, how do you keep track of all the sounds in your library? The naming of files must be crazy.
Yeah.
Did you have to all like agree on like a bunch of like rules about how things are named? Like because you got like multiple people working in the same with the same stuff. It must be hard to sort of like communicate and like make sure that everything is findable, so you can pass something from one audio designer to another and not have everyone get just completely confused.
Yeah, Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we kind of came up with a naming structure so if you're talking about our raw assets, just like when I record the wind going through the tree, right? We kind of like break it down by category and then prop and then some descriptions, and then followed by like what microphone you used or what sort of perspective, maybe if it's close up or far away. And so you can quickly look at the audio file and say, okay, this is wind blowing through this type of tree, and it's a really gusty afternoon with lots of leaf detail, like something easy like that. But even one step further down is we use a library management software called SoundMiner, or things like Basshead. Even like I think Reaper has something built in as well that you can use, where we can tag metadata to each one of these sound files, so we can categorize them. We can put keywords on there like what kind of tree, what the weather conditions were, location. Is it distorted? Is it not distorted? What is it loud? Like how any sort of description you want and any keyword you can put into there. So when we're searching for these sounds, I say, I want wind in this cottonwood tree. And then I'll get all the files in our library of all the wind in the cottonwood tree. And then I can audition and be like, what, I like this section of this one. Let's throw that in, edit it up and work with it. Or, I want something that's a crunchy break. And so I go and I find that drywall, recording and stuff like that. So those are all tagged with different keywords that we can then filter and find everything within a certain category. That's kind of mostly like, I think it's worked pretty well. We came up with our own naming convention that kind of adheres to a lot of other ones we've seen, like from our colleagues that aren't at the studio.
So we've got a question from David Devine, who wants to know, how did system resources differ by using live filters versus pre-rendering the same audio files? So, I mean, I imagine, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No.
It's just, it's either you're using up memory or CPU. Memory would be, if you for your pre-rendered asset in his words, those go into memory, and then we have a budget for the entire audio pool that we're constantly trying to manage, and deciding how much we give of our audio to guns versus environments versus zombies, and that's just a matter of like how many sounds per gun do we want to support? How many zombies? You're never getting in there. How many like variations of a sound? So like that's kind of one of the big ways we get more interesting audio experiences, that we have variations on every sound basically. So you're never hearing the same sound from the same thing twice in a row, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys sometimes will use things like pitch shifting sounds and stuff like that to sort of have each one be, you know, even if it's the same sound multiple times or something like that, you can still sort of make it be. What happened to Alex? You can still you can still make it be you know, sound not quite as repetitive, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our middleware Wise allows us to apply as much or as little pitch as we would like to use, you know, anytime a sound is re-triggered. And so we use that in just subtle ways, you know, very small amounts on just about everything. And so it helps to, expand the life of your sounds. When you're hearing something, you know, some of our players play this game for hundreds of hours, you know, so they're hearing the same sounds thousands of times. So it just helps kind of make things sound less repetitive when you're applying randomized parameters like pitch and EQ and, you know, filtering.
It actually, I think that you had mentioned while we were prepping for the stream that you actually you'll sometimes you'll lurk on Reddit and you'll pay attention to people who are playing the game specifically to try to find people who are calling out stuff that sounds repetitive or annoying or any complaints they might have about the audio. You're listening to the audience and you're trying to find a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll read through Reddit and I found a few things that were, you know, I would, you know, pretty much, you know, like audio bugs, really, like but things that I just didn't catch or we'd ever caught. The last one was someone who likes to drive the vehicles really slowly. Isn't the way I play, and so they just like to kind of go at, you know, like half speed, and they were hearing the sound of the tires screeching over and over, which is, you know, something you're only meant to hear when you floor it for the one time, right? And so that sound was just re-triggering at slow speed. So that was just an easy thing for me to find and fix, but not something I ever noticed on my own because it wasn't a way I ever drove the car.
Does the fact that you know where these sounds come from, like you know what it is exactly you're listening to, where the Foley was sourced from or whatever, does that ever sort of blind you to the way that that an audience member will hear it? Like if you know what the sound was, then you hear what the sound was, but they might actually hear it in an entirely different way?
I guess there's potential for that. You know, like we had a kind of silly example of that, I think that you caught, Geoffrey, which was like the sound of like consuming a book.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It sounded like, and because of the visual, like their hand comes up to their face and then the book sound plays, sounded like a gulp, like they ate the book, right? And when you told me that and I played it for myself, I like, yeah, you're right. It, you know, because of the visual and the sound was just close enough, like to match like a kind of a gulp noise. You know, that's some inadvertent sound design right there, right? Like that's what we do is try to make everyday things sound like something else, and you know, when we play it back against the visuals, right? And so that was just like sort of accidental sound design. It wasn't meant to be like you ate the book. Right?
But it's so much. I mean, we were constantly combining all of our senses, right? And what our knowledge is of what we're doing to try to, like the sound that we hear, we think that we're just hearing raw sounds, but we're hearing our brain processing sounds and interpreting them before that we even become conscious of them. Like I've seen these videos where somebody will make a v sound followed by a b sound, and they'll play the same sound to you, but if you're watching someone's lips and it looks like they're making a b or a v, you'll hear a b or you'll hear a v, even if it's the exact same sound. And so like your expectations play into it hugely. Yeah, Brant.
It's 3:59. We got to start wrapping it up.
Yeah, no, that was the last thing I was gonna say. I'm gonna let these guys say any one more thing and then we're gonna wrap it up. So yeah. Anyway, I'll get to, you know, why don't we just pop into the sort of goodbye mode here. So yeah, so thank you everybody for coming out to watch us, and thank you especially you know, Jordan, for coming in and sharing your expertise with the audience. I mean, it's so easy for people to sort of just not even notice how much of a difference that audio is making to the game, to their experience, until we start focusing on it and they realize what a difference your team is making. So thank you for coming out here.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having us.
And then Alex, yeah, thank you too, and especially thank you for creating that video to sort of illustrate the the making of the audio. You know, the audience you know owes you and Jordan a ton for what you guys have done here.
Yeah, it was really fun to be here. Working on this game and doing the sound for it is like so much fun, and it's our job, and that's insane. And Jordan is amazing to work with, and all his sounds are so cool.
Oh, thanks, sounds. You too.
And of course, Brant, thank you for coming out here for paying a lot more attention to the chat than anyone else could, and backing us up in combat.
Well, and I'd like to add that I may be. It looks like I'm frozen.
Yeah,
but
okay, you're back to normal now.
I'd like to add that our audio department deserves awards about every 20 minutes for the rest of time. Our game was small enough that it was overlooked by all the big, awards ceremonies that do stuff like that. But we have some of the best sounds in games, and I want to thank you guys for the hard work that you do.
Thanks, man. Yeah, well, we have a pretty savvy audience, actually. Like people notice a lot of stuff and a lot of subtle things. Like the mask, for example, was pretty subtle effect that people notice. So that's cool when these little details like start to add up and start to matter to people. So it's really good.
Well, Brant is right. We have run out of time, so we're going to switch to the outro screen and persuade everybody. You should come to us. Come check us out next week. So next week we're going to have Joe Swarner and one of our QA guys, Brandon. They're going to be out here talking about strategy, talking about the life of somebody working in QA. And so I hope you'll come out for that. Subscribe to our channel, all that stuff, and we'll get out of here in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes? No, 20 seconds. What are minutes? What are seconds? I don't know. Time is a flat circle. This is the awkward time in the stream when no one's face is on screen.
Yeah.
And we're just weird.
This would have been a great time for you audio nerds to put fart sounds in.
Oh man, we could have designed a whole soundscape for this moment.